is classical conditioning. In experiments credited with the discovery of classical conditioning, a Russian physiologist named Ivan Pavlov rang a bell and then gave a dog some food. After repeating this pairing multiple times, the dog eventually treated the bell as a signal for food and began salivating in anticipation of the treat. The dog food in Pavlov's experiment is the unconditioned stimulus, or US, because it elicits an unconditioned response, or UR. A conditioned stimulus produces a conditioned response. A conditioned stimulus, CS, is a signal that has no importance to the organism until it is paired with something that does have importance. For example, in Pavlov's experiment, the bell is the conditioned stimulus. Before the dog has learned to associate the bell with the presence of food, hearing the bell means nothing to the dog. However, after multiple pairings of the bell with the presentation of food, the dog starts to drool at the sound of the bell. This drooling in response to the bell is the conditioned response. Although it can be confusing, the conditioned response is almost always the same as the unconditioned response. In this example, drooling. However, it is called the conditioned response because it is conditional on, or depends on, being paired with the conditioned stimulus. For example, the bell. Learning doesn't take place all at once with classical conditioning. Instead, the learning is gradual and the strength of the conditioned response slowly grows as the organism experiences more and more pairings of the conditioned and unconditioned stimulus. Once the CS-US relationship is solidly established, though, the conditioned stimulus can be used in other procedures to establish other conditioned stimuli. For example, by using food as the unconditioned stimulus, we can first condition a dog to salivate whenever it hears a bell. Once this is done, we can add a light and follow that with the sound of the bell, without ever introducing the food. After enough of these pairings, the light itself will trigger salivation. In this setting, the light has become a signal for the bell, which we've already established as a signal for the appearance of food. This sequence is called second-order conditioning, a procedure in which a neutral stimulus, here the light, is paired with some already established CS, like the bell. A dog might be conditioned to respond to a bell with a particular pitch. When later tested on, that dog will respond most strongly if the test bell has the same pitch. But the dog will also respond, although a bit less strongly, to sounds a few notes higher or lower. The dog will also respond to sounds even higher or lower than that, but the response will be weaker still. In general, the greater the difference between the new stimulus and the original CS, the weaker the CR will be. In addition to being able to generalize stimuli, organisms are also able to discriminate between different stimuli. The phenomenon of discrimination is easy to demonstrate. An experiment might, for example, use a boat horn, a loud boat horn, as the unconditioned stimulus. This stimulus reliably produces a startle response when it's sounded. In the first part of the procedure, a red warning light is paired with the boat horn. And after a few pairings, this stimulus will reliably produce a conditioned response. You'll tense your muscles whenever the light appears. Once this CR is established, we proceed to the next step. Now, we intersperse trials pairing the red light and horn with other trials in which a new stimulus, say an orange light, is presented with no US, no boat horn. In this setup, you're likely to generalize at first by tensing up in response to both the red light, technically referred to as the CS+, and the orange light, the CS-. As the training continues, however, trials pairing the red light and horn mixed with the trials presenting the orange light alone, you'll learn to discriminate and will tense up only when you see the red light. After classically conditioning a particular response, the response can also be eliminated if the conditioned stimulus is presented repeatedly without the unconditioned stimulus. This effect is called extinction. For example, if Pavlov kept ringing the bell but never gave the dog any food afterwards, eventually the dog's conditioned response, salivating, would no longer happen when it heard the conditioned stimulus, the bell, because the bell would no longer be a predictor of food.